You're listening to the Fresh Hell podcast. Fresh Hell contains stories of a disturbing and often graphic nature and is intended for a mature audience. Please don't let your kids listen to this, or they might turn out like us.
In your own words, what is Director's Cut Radio?
I think it's a little bit of everything, brought to you on the weekly.
Yeah, it's a little bit of everything. I like that it covers the now, the past, the present.
It looks back at the news and pop culture and the week that we had and looking forward at the weeks to come.
We're just kind of like bringing light to reality of how things are constantly changing, and every week it's a wild update.
Like 1 week we could have Tommy Wiseau calling into the show.
Hey, this is Tommy Wiseau. You're listening to Director's Cut Radio.
We could have Jeffrey Katzenberg. Yes, the man that his name probably pops up more often in Disney documentaries than Walt himself, Mr. Jeffrey Katzenberg. How are you, Jeffrey?
I'm great, thank you, and I'm your answer man.
We have huge celebrities that call into the show and are part of the show that they can be themselves and chat with us.
Hey, this is Annie Johanna, and you're listening to Director's Cut Radio.
Thank you guys for watching and staying on and tuning back in.
At thedirectorscutradio.com.
Hi, I'm Annie the American.
And I'm Johanna the Austrian, and you just heard the promo for Director's Cut Radio, and please go over and check it out.
Yep, we also want to give a shout out to our new Patreon patrons. We are so very grateful for your support.
Yes, we truly are. So here is a shout out to our newest patrons. Helen Barker, Jessie Perry.
Hi, Jessie.
Sue from Lulubug Jewelry. I love her design so much.
I know. I ordered something from her, and it's a gift, and it came wrapped up beautifully, so I've tucked it away, and I can't wait to give it so that I can see it in person.
I'm waiting at the moment for a second necklace I ordered from her.
Oh, nice.
Vivia Bow and Sierra Crescenzo. I hope I pronounced that correctly.
Everybody had cool names today.
Yeah, well, they always have such cool names.
They really do. Yeah.
So if you have joined Patreon before last weekend and we still haven't given you your shout out, please drop us a quick message. I think we are on top of this, but I don't know. I just constantly worry that we forget one of you awesome people out there.
I know, like we could ever forget you, but forget to mention you publicly. It's scary. I'd forget my head if it wasn't attached to my body these days. It's rough.
And if you want to know more about our Patreon and what the content is over there and how you can join, please wait until the end of the episode. We're going to tell you everything about it. Another thing we kept forgetting until now is we haven't told you yet that we are, again, looking for your personal, paranormal, or otherwise creepy stories for next week's episode. So if you have an interesting story and you want us to read it on our Halloween episode, please send us an email before Sunday this week. So that will be the 25th of October. And also mention which name you want us to use when we read your story.
That's right. Yeah, let us know if you want to be anonymous or however you want to be called. We always enjoy reading your stories. Happy ones, sad ones, creepy ones, good creepy, bad creepy. They're all good. Tell us everything. We want to know everything.
So today's story is one of those stories that is in actuality probably just a naturally occurring set of coincidences in a place with a lot of history.
Right, but it's also one of those stories that makes you just sort of question coincidence and fate, and you dabble a little bit in reincarnation, destiny. It's weird.
It's weird, yeah, and we're here for it.
That's right. We love it, and we know you do too. So today is about two murders that took place over 150 years apart, but they have shocking similarities.
It really is a bit creepy when you hear it all, so I'd say we better get to telling it. And today we will be discussing rape and murder.
Yeah, I think sometimes that the law overlooks how linked those two crimes really are. Brock Turner.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So the first murder that we're going to talk about is the murder of Mary Ashford. And we actually have a lot more information on her case. The main sources for this part of the story are the court trial transcript, which was edited by John Hall in 1926, articles from BirminghamLive.com, their archives, and several articles from the time that we found using newspapers.com, most especially the Illustrated Police News, 12th of August, 1882, page 4, as well as a book about Mary Ashford by Naomi Clifford. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later.
And like always, you'll find all of our sources listed in our Facebook album. And we're working on getting them all on the website as well. And there are just too many to fit in our show notes.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so here we go. Today, Erdington is a small suburb of Birmingham, England. And I'm not sure I've been to Erdington except in passing, but I have been to Birmingham several times. I remember, so my sister Moose and my late husband Adam and I, we were over in the UK, and I think we'd flown in on, I think it was Bonfire Night 2003, because my wedding was summer 2004, and I think we were out doing wedding planning stuff, and my sister had come. And since we were there, Adam planned a reunion with friends from uni. He had a degree in technical writing from Coventry University. And so Birmingham was sort of central for people that were coming in on a train from different parts of the country. We drove up from Worcester, which is where most of my side of the family are, and we could not find our hotel. And we were circling the Bullring area just over and over and over again trying to find the hotel. And it turned out you could only see the sign that had the name of the hotel on it from the pickup area of the train station. Like, that's the only place in which you could see the name of the hotel. So thankfully, we'd taken our 47th wrong turn and then used the train station to turn around and found it, which was a shame, really, because it was the kind of place where you check the bed before you got in. And I'm pretty sure Moose wore her socks in the shower. It was a really nice view of a dumpster through the bullet hole in the window. I'm kidding. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't good. Lots of stains. This is like you go into a hotel and you're like, oh boy. So yeah, we went to the post office, which like the Bullring is not, it's misleading. It's another area of just shops and restaurants. I was confused for a while when they kept telling us we were going to the post office. And then I was like, okay, but then what? We're just all going to the post office. But yeah, the Bullring area is now, they redid it a little while ago, and it's a really beautiful, nice shopping plaza. But there's been shopping at the Bullring area since actual bulls went there for auction going back, predating the 1100s. So, yeah.
It's a place rich of history.
It is, yeah. And Birmingham is also, side note, where I met my very dear friend Nell for the first time. Nell and I also started out as internet friends. She might have been my first serious internet friend, Johanna. I think I'm reminiscing now. But yeah, we met in the very dark and shady underground that is knitting forums. All right, so back to Erdington. It was a fairly popular village going right back to the 8th century. It's located halfway between Chester and Wales, which is beautiful town, and London. Okay. Erdington. Black Sabbath used to play there. The Moody Blues are from Erdington, and so is comedian John Oliver. And today, Erdington is a suburb of Birmingham in the West Midlands, but in 1817, it was a village in Warwickshire near Sutton Coldfield. So, Mary Ashford was an attractive and well-liked 20-year-old woman who was living with and working for her uncle. He was a farmer in Langley Heath, which was between Birmingham and Sutton Coldfield. Mary kept house for him, and she helped sell products from his farm at the market in Birmingham. Twice a week, she'd walk 7 miles each way to the market, carefully carrying eggs and milk that she would sell in her allocated spot at the market. Mary was born in 1797 to a poor but respected family. She had at least a sister and a brother. I believe her dad was a gardener who worked in Erdington, where her parents lived. Monday, May 26, 1817, was Whit Monday. And according to timeanddate.com, quote, Whit Monday, or Pentecost Monday, is a Christian holiday. It is the day after Pentecost, also known as Whit Sunday, which commemorates the descent of the Holy Ghost upon the disciples of Jesus Christ, according to the New Testament of the Bible, end quote. So it was a holiday at that time in the UK in the early 1800s. I believe it's no longer a holiday in England, but it still is in Austria. Is that right?
It's Pfingstsonntag and Pfingstmontag. There are public holidays here.
On that Monday, Mary left her uncle's house early in the morning and went to her parents' house in Erdington to fetch a nice dress from her mother because the local public house, the 3 Tons, which everyone called Tyburn House, it was having its annual club feast and dance, and it was a very popular event that had a huge attendance. I think if it's the early 1800s and you're single and of marriageable age and living in a small village, you're not going to miss a party. It's still true today, right?
Absolutely. It's definitely still like this here in small villages.
Yeah, for sure. After she got her dress, she headed over to her friend Hannah Cox's house. Hannah also lived in Erdington with her mother, where she left her white dress and stockings for the dance. So Mary leaves all of her stuff at her friend's Hannah's, and she sets off to walk the 7 miles into Birmingham to do the errands for her uncle, and after work, she walks the 7 miles back, uphill both ways in the snow. No, but seriously, that's a long, walking 14 miles for work in a day.
That's long.
That's a long day. But after that, she went to her friend's house and the two girls got ready together for the evening, which is, that's been going on forever, right? So Hannah had apparently also gone while Mary was at work and gotten some white shoes for Mary so she wouldn't have to wear her sturdy work boots with her pretty white dress. The two young ladies left for the dance around 7:30 that night, and when they arrived, they found the party in full swing. Most of those attending the dance were laborers and farm girls, but also in attendance that night was the son of a more prominent family, Abraham Thornton. His father was a builder in nearby Castle Bromwich. He was 24 years old, and descriptions of him range from handsome to loathsome. And the drawings we have of him, he looks just average guy. It doesn't really matter what he looks like. What does matter is that he was alleged to have said that night, upon seeing Mary at the dance, he said allegedly that he knew who she was and he had slept with her sister 3 times.
You know we love it when they count.
You gotta know what to confess though, right? But yeah, he said, quote, "I've been intimate with her sister 3 times and will be with her or I'll die for it." End quote. He really sounds like he knows how to charm the ladies, right?
Who doesn't love being told your suitor slept with your sister?
Thrice? No, I know. And now I know I should say he denied ever saying this later on, and it's hearsay at best. It absolutely is, but it does come into play later on. Whether or not this account was actually true, we know that the two spent the night talking and dancing, and he certainly seemed to be trying to woo her. And also, it's worth mentioning that this was a period of time where your station in life really meant something, right? So nowadays, it's not that big a deal. If you're poor and you meet a somewhat wealthier guy while you're out, it's like no big deal, right? But at that time, it would have been a pretty big deal. And so I'm sure that he held sway over all the girls. And historically speaking, these parties were notorious for young men drinking a lot. And so Hannah and Mary had talked earlier, and they said that they'd probably leave around 11 p.m. before the party got too rowdy. But when the time came to leave and Hannah was ready to go, Mary asked for just one more dance with Abraham.
Ugh.
I know. So Hannah is not interested in dancing, and she says that she'll wait outside for Mary, and out she goes. And before long, she's joined by, now in a few places you hear him described as a suitor, but I do believe he was a neighbor by the name of Benjamin Carter, and he had promised to walk her home. So they stood outside chatting for about 20 minutes, and then Hannah was like, "Listen, would you please just go in and get Mary? I am ready to get out of here." And so he did. He came back out and he told Hannah that Mary was just going to dance one more dance. And so she waited, and sure enough, before long, out came Mary with Abraham Thornton, and the 4 of them began the walk along the road, back home. They reach a fork in the road around midnight, and it was pretty close to Hannah's house, so Hannah went home alone. Benjamin goes back to the dance, and Mary says that she's going to be staying at her grandfather's house because it was so close, and so she and Abraham walk off together. Now, there's some speculation as to whether she really meant to go to her grandfather's, because remember, her regular daily work clothing was in the other direction back at Hannah's, so she'd have to go back and get them at some point.
Look, she wouldn't be the first girl who wanted a bit of freedom with a man she liked.
Oh, absolutely not. And I feel compelled to also mention that even if she did want to stay out all night with a boy, it doesn't mean that she was planning to have sex. Not that we care if she was. I mean, she's a 20-year-old consenting adult. But of course, in terms of our story, things like virginity mattered a lot in the early 1800s, right? So regardless, Hannah goes home to bed and Mary and Abraham set off walking together. At 1 minute to 4 in the morning, Hannah's woken up by Mary, and she needs to get in and get her work clothes because her uncle is going to go to market soon, and she needs to be there to help him with all of that.
Sorry to interrupt you. That's so strangely precise, right?
Well, yes.
I mean, I know it's probably because then the clock tower the bell started to ring, yeah, but I mean, why wouldn't you say it was 4 o'clock?
Well, only because it's only because in this case, everything that you read about the time, it comes back to the fact that Hannah's mother's clock was 40 minutes fast. And so there was a whole thing where they had to work out exactly what time it actually was. Hannah's mom didn't want anybody being late for work, so her clocks were always set fast so that people would be early. It is. That's how I used to do. But then I'd remember that I set it fast, and then I'd reconcile that automatically in my head. I'm the worst. But that's why it's 1 minute to 4. Yeah, they had to work out the discrepancy in the time because of alibis and things that happen later. So it's very specific, isn't it? 1 minute to 4 in the morning. And I was going to say 4, but then I was like, well, it is very precisely 1 minute to 4. So there you go. Your friend's banging on the door. She better be a good friend, right? 4 in the morning. Oy. I guess she bangs on the door at 4 in the morning and nobody shoots her. They just let her in. So she's like, I need to go. They say she started getting changed in the kitchen, bundled up all her clothes and her purchases that she'd brought back from Birmingham the day before, and got changed and left her friend presumably to go back to bed. Hopefully Hannah got a few more hours of sleep. Hannah would later testify that Mary seemed calm and in good spirits, and if there were any stains on Mary's dress, she hadn't noticed them. But she also said it's not something she'd have been looking for. A few other people also did see Mary walking alone quickly up north, up the road. The road was called Bell Lane, but today it is Orphanage Road. All right, so at around 6 a.m., now it's the morning of Tuesday, May 27th, the morning following the dancing, a man named George Jackson was cutting through some fields near what is today Pipes Park. He was on his way to work. Apparently, he'd worked making guns. I think he was a gun barrel borer. Say that 3 times fast. But something I read was saying how because this was only a few years after Waterloo and the Napoleonic Wars had ended, and even though England was kind of always fighting someone, right, on account of the sun never sets on the British Empire, but at that time there wasn't that much work for gun makers. So I guess George was just really glad to have any job. And George had even more bad luck that day because he noticed what looked like women's clothing on the ground near a water-filled pit. So he walks over and he picks up a white shoe and he sees that there is some blood on it. And so now he's concerned. And so he starts to run to Penn's Mill. And a man named William Lavelle, he sees George running and comes out to see what's going on. And George explains and asks Lavelle to come with him back to where he'd seen the clothing. And so Lavelle agrees that he'll go back and he'll stay at the site while George runs to get help. As they get back to the area, and now there's these 2 men out there kind of looking around, George decides to investigate a little bit more, and he sees that there's blood along the edge of the lane, sort of where the hedge forms a border, and then what is described as, quote, a lake of blood, end quote. Now, I know what you're thinking, probably, because I bet a lot of you are like me, and you're imagining the elevator scene from The Shining. With a lake of blood. I mean, that's a lot of blood, right?
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah. So in the trial transcript that I read, it's described as being, quote, this is what he said in court, I believe, quote, about as much as I could cover with my extended hand, end quote.
He must have had some really huge hands then.
It's just a man that would call that a lake of blood. No one with a period would ever describe that as a lake of blood, though. Am I right?
Maybe he was like, I don't know how you call it in English, if you can't see blood, if you're like squeamish.
Yes, maybe. But
it was a lake of blood. It was as much as my hand.
It's as much as my hand. It's a puddle. That's literally a puddle of blood, sir. I mean, it's more blood than you'd want to come across anywhere without an explanation, right? You don't want to see. If there's enough blood somewhere that you notice that it's blood, it's too much blood.
These are people who live in the countryside, more or less.
Right. They should be used to seeing blood. Anyway, probably not a fatal amount of blood loss, right? Not so much blood that you would think, someone had died. So work at the mill, it began at 6:30 in the morning. And so factory workers and farm laborers that were heading to work as well in the area, they of course noticed 2 men talking in a field, which is so funny, right? It's like, well, all of a sudden people noticed that there were 2 men in a field. But of course that would be strange, wouldn't it? Because
nothing ever happens
No, exactly. Nothing ever happens. It's like that John Mulaney thing that I sent to you with the let's get dressed up in our finest clothing and wave at boats with handkerchiefs. It's look, what else were you going to do, right?
Since I moved to the countryside, it's crazy. People know everything. Last time I met a woman on the street and she said, "Oh, I noticed you changed your license plate." I'm like, yeah, I did.
That's great. You'll never go missing. People know where you are all the time.
Yeah.
But it's just funny now to think that, like, well, people going to work noticed two men talking and everyone came to see what was happening. And that's what happened, though. And so George Jackson, he's like, all right, there's enough people involved with this. I'll see myself out. And so he fucks off and goes to work. It's funny. That would be my dad. Like, all right, I don't need to get involved with this. I'm going to be late for work. All right. Back at the pit, there were now about a dozen men who had come to the area surrounding the pit, and one of the laborers was sent off and came back with a rake and a couple of reins. And so they used this to try and drag the pit. And twice they threw the rake into the water and came up with nothing. But on the third attempt, as they feared, the body of a young woman came to the surface and was pulled to the bank of the pit. It was Mary Ashford. She was, of course, local to the area and known by pretty much everybody there. Around this time, the owner of the mill showed up, and he made the decision that Mary's body should be taken to Lavelle's cottage. I bet the Lavelles were just fucking thrilled by this turn of events. No disrespect to the dead, but can we just take a moment to be just grateful to our modern-day hospitals, morgues, and funeral homes?
Yeah, this has come up so many times now in our episodes, bodies of murder victims, even decapitated victims being carried home or to nearby houses, or like the ones in Hinterkaifeck where they had to do the autopsy right there on the farm, and they even, cut their heads off.
Yeah. Didn't they autopsy the Bordens too, I think, on the dining room table?
Yes.
Yeah. And I mean, I guess in a way I understand, right? So if they brought Josie Langmaid home or they examined the Hinterkaifeckers, that's still one of my favorite words, the Hinterkaifeckers at home. Yeah, I don't know. I get it when they do that. It's awful, but it's the norm, right? That it would be done at your home.
I mean, where else could they have done it? There was nothing.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But imagine it's just like a Tuesday morning and people show up with a stranger's corpse that they're just going to go ahead and have you keep in your house for a few days. And you're going to have to wash and redress the body.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I know that Lavelle knew her, but his wife, William's wife, Fanny, I don't think she knew her. But she was given the job of washing the body in preparation for the doctors who would be coming from Birmingham to examine Mary's remains. Yeah. Raise a glass to Fanny there because she's a badass. It's like they just show up with a corpse and she's like, I got it. Don't worry about it. All right. Let's talk about some of the evidence that was found around where Mary's body was found. There were footprints indicating that a man and woman had walked together to the area of the pit, and then the man had walked back alone. There were small amounts of blood here and there, and the mill owner went to Tyburn House to see who Mary had been seen with the night before, right? That's like, well, let's find out what was happening. Once they find out it's Abraham Thornton, the landlord went to Castle Bromwich, and he had no trouble finding Thornton. So he tells him, we need to talk to you. Mary was murdered. And he was like, I was with her till 4 a.m. And so he says, no problem, I'll go back with you to Tyburn House. An assistant constable had come in from Birmingham. His name was Thomas Dales, and he apparently had a lengthy interrogation for Thornton. They arrested him. The problem was, he didn't take any notes during his interrogation, and he couldn't remember anything. So that's a problem. Next, Thornton was examined by the magistrate, William Bedford, and I believe magistrates were used for minor crimes or for preliminary inquiries into more serious crimes, which was the case here. Bedford examined the bloodstains and footprints in the field, and he ordered the prints be preserved, which was smart because people were all over the place and rain was coming. It's like another one of those, crime scenes where there's already immediately a dozen people there. stepping on everything. So then he questioned Thornton, who told him that after Hannah had left them, they walked through some fields, they climbed over a stile. A stile are like steps that a person can get up and over a fence in a field. So they walked across several fields and they talked and they had a really nice night. And then he walked her back to Hannah's house so she could collect her clothes for work. And he waited for her on the green. But by 4, when she hadn't come back, he decided to set off without her so he wouldn't be late for work. And several people had seen him walking home alone. He had arrived home at about 5 o'clock that morning. The magistrate then ordered that Thornton should be searched, and when they searched him, they found that he had bloodstains on his undergarments. Abraham Thornton then changed his story. He said that he had had sex with Mary, but it was consensual, and he didn't know anything about the murder. His shoes were taken, and they were compared with the shoe prints at the scene. Thankfully, 2 of the dozens of prints had been saved, and apparently his shoe was a perfect match. This is actually credited as some of the earliest police footwear forensics, and like the Josie Langmaid case, they had apparently matched a nail mark in the boot heel. Finally, 12 hours after her body had been brought to the Lavelle's house, 2 medical professionals arrived from the city and requested that Mrs. Lavelle should move the body into a larger, better-lit room, and she should undress the body for them to examine it. I just feel bad for this woman. So they went to have a look at the footprints and bloodstains while she did as they asked, and then they came in and they examined the body, and then on Thursday, May 29th, a proper full autopsy was done. They found only plants from the water-filled pit in her stomach. I think it was like duckweed. They also found that she had 2 lacerations to her vagina caused by losing her virginity they felt by force. And they also reported that she had been menstruating and had probably gotten her period at the dance without realizing it. The police and the prosecution believed that Thornton had paid Mary lots of attention, which of course she'd like. We all know the reasons why. And then he walked her safely home to her friend Hannah's, which is why Hannah reported that Mary seemed in a rush to get to work, but she was otherwise in good spirits, right? They think that he then rushed away and laid in wait for her to pass by on her way to work, and he surprised her and raped her. And because nothing was in her stomach at all, they think she hadn't eaten for 24 hours. And she had walked at least 14 miles that previous day and been out dancing and hadn't slept. And so the normally healthy girl just fainted when she was assaulted. We know she was alive when she was thrown in the pond, which is awful. They believe her loss of consciousness had maybe thrown him and that he'd meant to just have her as he boasted he would, even if it was by rape. But having her suddenly be unconscious and unable to threaten into silence, he panicked and threw her into the pond where she drowned without ever regaining consciousness.
Do you think it's also possible he thought she was dead and, that made him panic and he wanted to just get rid of the body?
I think that is absolutely possible, yeah. The evidence against him, it was pretty strong, but it was also all circumstantial. He claimed that he never said anything about her sister. He said that the connection, that's how he described their having sex, was they had a connection. Maybe that's what the term everyone used at the time, I don't know, but okay. So he said the connection they had made was consensual and that there were plenty of witnesses who saw him walking home alone in an unhurried manner, which is true. The local working class people who were like Mary had been, they really saw this as terrible treatment toward one of theirs by somebody in a higher station, right? And they were absolutely furious. But the jury was instructed to ignore the consensual sex and only rule on the murder and the rape. They were reminded by the judge that according to witness statements, Abraham couldn't have done it. He didn't have enough time. And so the jury only deliberated for 6 minutes. They didn't even leave the jury box before they declared Abraham was not guilty. And Warwickshire and just the country in general was not happy with this outcome.
Yeah, but that wasn't the end of this story, because at the time appeals worked a little bit differently than they do today. Today an appeal is usually when someone found guilty wants their case looked at again, and they appeal to be set free. In this case, a relative of the deceased can bring an appeal and have trial again, hoping they'll be found guilty. And that's what Mary's brother William did. The village helped raise the money to do this, and so William had Abraham hauled back into court to once again defend himself, which causes a bunch of double jeopardy issues news. But no one expected what happened next.
They really didn't. Abraham Thornton, he's called back in to, the appeal. And he goes into the courtroom and he takes out this, white leather mitten. The embroidery is nice, though. It's green embroidery with a decorative feather accent attached to it. And he very dramatically throws it down onto the floor of the courtroom and demands a trial by battle. It's the best, right? So he says, quote, "I am not guilty and I will defend myself with my body," end quote. So holy shit, now poor William Ashford is being told that if he wants to get any justice for his dead sister, he's going to have to battle for it. Now, do you remember Magistrate Bedford? He's William's lawyer now, and they all hate Thornton. Everybody does. And so on November 11th, Bedford writes to his law clerk, and he writes, quote, "I am sorry to say that difficulties have been started, likely to occasion much trouble and perhaps ultimate defeat. It seems the appellee, Thornton, has the option of waging battle and of challenging the appeller, William Ashford, in single combat, which if not accepted by the appeller, the suit is lost, and if accepted, and the appellee can hold out from sunrise to sunset, then he wins the contest and claims his discharge. Otherwise, his election subjects him not only to a good thrashing, but also the pain of death into the bargain. It is rumored here that is the plea intended to be set up by the defendant, and unless we can devise any means by argument to induce the court not to allow it, I am very apprehensive our poor little knight will never be able to contend the battle with his brutish opponent." End quote. So his attorney said, quite rightly that Thornton was compounding the murder of the sister with the attempted murder of the brother, right? But anyway, Ashford ended up not accepting the challenge, and because he didn't accept the challenge, the charges against Thornton were dropped, and he was let go. He was so hated that he had to leave the country. He boards a ship so that he can emigrate to New York, but somebody recognizes him on the ship and word spreads like wildfire, and the passengers demand he be removed from the ship or they'll leave. Yeah, that's how much they fucking hated this guy. And so he was taken off the ship. And then he finally got to New York. He must have sailed under an alias or something. And I think he did, he worked as a bricklayer and he married and had a family. And that's sort of where his story ends for us. In June of 1819, Lord Eldon, he was the Lord Chancellor. He introduced a bill to Parliament with the aim of abolishing both private appeals following acquittals and trial by battle. People have tried to claim trial by battle since then. Most recently, I think it was 2002, and a man tried to demand trial by combat for a traffic ticket. It did not work. He had to pay the fine. I think it was 150 quid. Mary was buried in the churchyard at Sutton Coldfield, and her murder stone, she's got a murder stone. I'm not sure. So I tried to look, of course, I tried to look more into murder stones. I don't know if Josie's monument, that's more of a murder monument. I think these murder stones are on the graves themselves, but I bet somebody out there knows for sure and they will tell us. Mary's tombstone reads, or I should say it used to read, I don't think it's legible anymore, quote, "As a warning to female virtue and humble monument to female chastity, this stone marks the grave of Mary Ashford, who, in the 20th year of her age, having incautiously repaired to a place of amusement without proper protection, was brutally violated and murdered on 27th of May, 1817, end quote. So, I think murder stones were always a cautionary tale. Mary's grave is also said to face the direction of Abraham Thornton's house. Specifically, you'll see, I'll post a picture, but it's it's like at a weird angle. It's not like how the rest of the graves would be. The murder of Mary Ashford is unsolved. Now, there's a book by Naomi Clifford about this case, and she claims to have found new evidence that proves who the killer is, and I really want to know what she found, but I haven't had a chance to read it, and there aren't any spoilers on her website. I looked everywhere I could. I've ordered the book, but haven't been able to read it yet. Although I guess if I had read it, I still wouldn't be able to maybe say what she thought because I don't want to spoil her book. But if you've read it, let us know your thoughts. And speaking about books on this case, I promise I've only got 2 more quick fun facts for you. We know that Sir Walter Scott, he was familiar with this case, and it is believed that the end scene in Ivanhoe is heavily influenced by this case. I'm not going to give you any spoilers, even though you've literally had 100 years to read it. And the mitten or gauntlet, the cute white leather mitten that was thrown down by Abraham was sold at auction at Christie's in July 2019 for £6,875. It's pretty. It's lovely embroidery. We'll post a photo. I don't know if it's worth 7,000 quid, but
Honestly, the inscription of the stone makes my skin crawl. But yeah, we all know it was different times. And then again, we haven't come so far, have we?
No, it's very victim-blamey, isn't it? And we're still victim-blamey, and I get it. I really do. I get it. It makes us feel safer, doesn't it? To say, oh, well, that person didn't behave as we think they should have, and see what happened. You think you're safer because you don't hitchhike. You're safer because you don't have sex with people you just met. You don't drink alcohol or whatever the thing is, right? But it's all bullshit because it doesn't matter, really, who you are or what you're doing in your spare time as long as you aren't hurting people. You don't deserve to be murdered.
So now we're going to go forward in time, and that's exactly 157 years later. And for this second murder, the main source is the Birmingham Live website. Some great articles there. One is by Mike Lockley, and others just credited to Steph. So thank you to the people who run the website.
Yeah, it's a good website.
We have a lot less information on this second case because it's still open, and so we have, less sources, and we also want to be a little bit more sensitive to her family and their privacy. It's always easier to have cases that are like 100, 200 years ago, right?
Yes.
You can separate yourself more from old-timey cases. Yeah, that's how I feel, yeah.
You can, exactly. Yeah, absolutely.
So it's May 27th, 1974, and Barbara Forrest is a beautiful, bright young woman. She's 20 years old and she works in childcare. She's described as a nurse and a social worker, and we know she worked closely with children. And again, it was Whit Monday, and she and her boyfriend Simon had been at church because they were both devout Lutherans, and Simon's father was the minister at St. Mark's. Simon was actually filling in for him that Whit Monday. So both of them were also involved in youth ministry and other church causes. And after services were over, the young couple went out dancing and having a generally good time visiting pubs in the city centre and in the Handsworth area. Simon had walked Barbara to the bus stop at Colmore Circus so she could catch the number 67 at 1 a.m. and the 21-year-old said goodbye to her at the bus stop before heading across town to get on a different bus route home. It's the last time we know that she was seen alive. It wasn't until 4th of June that her body was found less than 500 yards from her home on Chester Road in Erdington. It was also very close to the Pipe Hayes Children's Home where she worked as a nurse. And like the Mary Ashton case, police believe that her attacker had lain in wait behind the hedges. She was found only yards from where Mary had been found. She was lying partially unclothed in a shallow ditch, covered with bracken, and she had been raped and strangled. Barbara's family were of course devastated. Her mother, Margarete Forrest, and I think that's how she pronounced her name because she was German-born, she said, quote, "She was a wonderful girl. This is the sort of thing you hear of happening, but never think it can happen to you," end quote. I think we all get that.
Yep.
Police immediately launched a serious inquiry and there were over 100 people working the case. One of the most mysterious aspects of the case is after her boyfriend, Simon, had left her at the bus stop, there wasn't really any sight of her by anyone. Some thought it was possible that she'd been abducted or taken a ride with someone she thought was safe, and this theory was bolstered by the fact that not a single person on the number 67 bus service could recall seeing her. Had she gotten on the wrong bus? Or had she been ambushed by the killer when she got off the bus so close to home? Police really left no stone unturned and they reached out to criminal informants. There were posters that the Evening Mail had printed and they were all over the city and surrounding towns. They even had a policewoman who looked a little bit like Barbara retrace her steps walking the 10 minutes home from the Tyburn Road bus stop, dressed in a similar clothing to what Barbara wore that night, and they were hoping to jog the memory of people in her path. And we've got photos of that too, that we're gonna share on Facebook. But they got no leads. Police told women to be careful. There was a violent man out there who hadn't been apprehended. And finally, someone came forward who had seen a blue car parked near where Barbara's body was found. And this led back to a man Barbara worked with at the children's home. When the police investigated him, they found his alibi was a lie and that his mother was covering for him. And if that wasn't suspicious enough, they found blood on a pair of his trousers. The case went to trial, but a week into it, the judge essentially dismissed the case, saying the evidence against the man was entirely circumstantial, and that man's name? Thornton. Michael Thornton. Barbara's case is still unsolved, and her parents Margarita and Gordon, as well as her sister Erica, were featured in a couple of 2012 articles by Mike Lockley on Birmingham Live. And they were saying that they had hoped that maybe advances in DNA would reignite the case. Then it seemed that the police came back saying they, quote, had no further forensic evidence to explore, end quote. So I think we can presume that means that the evidence was either lost or stored improperly, which happens way too often.
All the time, especially with these older cases. And to be fair, they didn't know.
No,
right?
they didn't, yeah.
They had no way to know in the 70s that
Yeah.
if they just stored things properly, they could have solved something. But now we know.
Yeah.
Now we know. When you know better, you do better.
I don't blame the police in most of these things. Like, as you say,
No.
how could they know? It's just so
frustrating.
frustrating, exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So thankfully our methods of scientific forensic investigations are getting better every year. I mean, there are so many improvements still, but that wasn't going to help Barbara's family find closure. The family suffered another loss when it seems Barbara's things went missing. So they had asked for DNA to be run, and the police said there was nothing to run. The family said if there's nothing to run and no hope for further evidence, then they would like Barbara's personal possessions back. Her handbag, ring, watch, and 2 necklaces, 1 gold, 1 pearl, and they were gifts from her godparents. Yeah, but it sadly seems those might have been lost too. We couldn't find any more info on these aspects of things, so if you know, please send us an update. But when Mike Lockley wrote this article in 2012, Barbara's parents were in their late 80s and early 90s at the time, so it's probably safe to assume her parents are very likely with their daughter again, or will be soon.
If you've lost someone, right, it kind of changes how you feel about your own time coming.
Oh,
'Cause
definitely.
It's like, well, I'll be with them again, then it's less scary.
And we definitely send our thoughts to her family.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder, I might email Mike Lockley just to see if he ever found out more. I don't want to become a stalker, but it's like, did we ever find out? Did they get their stuff back? It just, it makes me sad.
It's so sad.
It makes me so sad.
I mean, I get it because at the moment, and my dad died of natural things, you know, but you want to hold on to everything.
Oh, yeah.
And it feels like everything is slipping through your fingers. And now this family was thinking the police held on to the things and they could get it back eventually. And it's sad.
And you get crazy when it comes to things. Like when Adam was killed, I remember I had his bag, like his overnight bag that the state trooper had given me, his things. And when I finally got back to my house, I stayed with my parents for a few weeks. And when I finally got back to my house, I opened up his bag and it was like, I took his toothbrush and I put it back in the toothbrush. Like I put his things away. Do you know what I mean? And, and it was like a year before I could I didn't handle that well at all. But yeah, it's hard and it's just devastating. All right. I'm going to cry. So let's talk about the spooky similarities between, I'm shaking off the
sad.
What did we see recently? It was like, I've got a case of oh shit, it was so funny. A case of the morbs. I've got a case of the morbs. Shake it off. All right. So this is where we talk about the very spooky similarities between these two cases. And there have been memes about this, lots of little articles and things about it. So we are going to now talk about the incredible, creepy coincidences in this case.
Yes. Okay, so first of all, both women were murdered on the same day, May 27th. So that was in 1817 and May 27th in 1974. Second of all, not only did they die on the same day, it was also with Monday in both instances. Then, both had been out dancing the night of the murder. Both women were virgins who had been raped, strangled, and left in a ditch. Their bodies were found in the same location, The main suspect in both cases was a man with the surname Thornton. Both cases are unsolved. Not only did the two women share the same date of death, and they were both 20 years old, they also shared the same birthday.
The same birthday and the same death day. It's like, ooh, chills. Yeah.
Yes. Not only that, but before their death, Mary and Barbara both said that they felt a sense that something bad was going to happen. Mary Ashford had confided in her friend Hannah's mother that she had, quote, bad feelings about the week to come, end quote, before she was murdered. Forrest had told a colleague that, quote, this is going to be my unlucky month, I just know it. Don't ask me why, end quote.
Oh, it's spooky.
So spooky.
Spooky. But how accurate is it? All right. Now we're going to ruin the spook. Okay. Spook ruiners. All right. They did die on the same day, and it was Whit Monday both times. And Whit Monday is a movable feast, right? So Christmas, for example, is not a movable feast. It's every year on December 25th.
But Easter is a movable feast based in part of the lunar cycles in the Jewish calendar, so the date changes every year, and so the dates surrounding it, like Lent and Pentecost and Whit Monday, they are all movable feasts, making it even more unusual that they die on the same date that was also a Whit Monday.
Yeah. So points 1 and 2 are creepy and true. And I did try to find out how often Easter has been on the same date, and I couldn't. But I think it's not uncommon, right? So it's like my birthday is May 10th, and it's often on Mother's Day. It happened several times. It was this year, of course. My mom died at the end of March, and May 10th was Mother's Day, which was also my birthday and my sister's birthday. And so I looked it up, and it's going to be again on 2026 and then 2037. So it happens, right?
Yeah, or it's like my birthday being on Fat Tuesday. I was born on a Fat Tuesday, and my birthday had fallen on Fat Tuesday like 2 or 3 times since then, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly.
It's still creepy, though.
It is. It definitely is. And, you know, having the same day of death is interesting, but having it be Whit Monday as well, it's definitely slimmer odds there.
Yeah.
Because they weren't born the same year, you know. So, yeah, that's definitely a lot more coincidental.
So both had been out dancing the night of the murder. That's true. Both women were virgins who had been raped, strangled, and left in a ditch. So that's true too.
Well, maybe. This one, ignoring the virgins bit, the biggest problem with the statement is that we don't actually know if Mary was murdered. They say that she was strangled, but there's actually no evidence of that I was able to find anywhere.
True.
Some people think that after she had sex with Abraham, she threw herself into the water. I'm not sure I buy this one personally, but I do wonder if she might have had an accidental fall, or maybe it was someone other than Abraham. We just don't know.
Yeah, and I wouldn't completely discount that she threw herself in the water part. I'm not saying that it happened, but it has happened, you know, due to the whole being dishonored bullshit as a rape victim.
Yep.
There are cases known where girls and women decided to commit suicide. And it's horrible.
Oh, absolutely.
But yeah, it's not necessarily what happened here. We don't know.
No, but you're absolutely right. And I think what you said earlier could also be right, that maybe he didn't know that she was still alive. He thought she had died. It could be another situation like Gay Gibson, where right?
That's what I was thinking of before,
Yep.
That's a problem with the statement in the coincidence list. We just don't know Mary's cause of death. We know she likely drowned, but not the manner, and it could be homicide, it could be accidental, it could be suicide. We don't know,
Exactly.
That's true.
Yeah. So what's next? Their bodies were found in the exact same location.
I mean, they were found in roughly the same location within a few hundred yards.
Close.
Yeah, but not the exact same place.
No.
Next, we have the main suspect in both cases was a man with the surname Thornton. Both cases are unsolved, so that is true.
That is true, yes. Lastly, we have not only did the two women share the same date of death, and they were both 20 years old, but they also shared the same birthday. I don't think this one's true. It could be. This is one that I looked up, and I used Ancestry. I found some information. But for Mary, I could only find a baptismal record for December 31st, 1796, and it's saying that she is 6 weeks old. And if that's the case, then she wasn't born in 1797, she was born in 1796. 1996.
Yeah.
And I don't know. And for Barbara, I found registration of birth for January, February, and March of 1954, but no specific date. And I'm also not completely sure it's the right Mary Ashford and the right Barbara Forrest, like looking at these old records. So it's very possible that I'm just not finding, the info. I think it's more likely that the same birthday aspect was added to make the comparison creepier. I would love to be proved wrong. If you've got info, please, please, please let us know. But yes, they died on the same day, but no, there's no evidence they had the same birthday.
And last but not least, what do you think about them having prophetic feelings about their own death?
I have thoughts on this, but I actually really want to know your thoughts on this.
I think it's possible, but I also think it's more likely that it's lore. That it was added afterwards, just like the birthday. Or maybe something the victims had said before their death and people then gave it a different spin. You know what I mean? Like, for example, the last time I saw my dad, he told me something, and that he can now, die in peace, more or less. And my dad was not close to anything connected to dying, he was...
Sure, yeah.
I told him, don't be stupid, you have so much time. And then, 10 days later, he was dead. And now, obviously, I'm thinking, did he feel something? Or was it just a coincidence? Or did he know something? Or is it just something people say? I don't know, I'm torn on this. What do you think?
I know. So Adam actually had made jokes about dying, the week that he had died. And, I found my biological family recently, my mother's side, my biological mother's side. And it's been really lovely getting to know everybody. But yeah, I have, my biological grandfather predicted he wouldn't be coming home from a hunting trip. And he was correct. It was a car accident. He was young family. It was awful. But yeah, this didn't surprise me when I found that out. I swear I've got some witchiness in me. It's just the least useful form of witchiness. It's not... I don't know the lottery numbers or,
Too bad.
Yeah. Oh, another thing we should mention, and we'll post photos of them, but people say they look a lot alike. I think that's a stretch, but we have a sketch of what Mary maybe looked like. And Barbara was lovely, absolutely beautiful girl. They both were. And the last thing to mention is Pipe Hayes Park and the Georgian mansion on it. So that's known as Pipe Hayes Hall. They're allegedly haunted. And some say that the park itself is the resting spot for countless plague burials. I'm not sure that's true or legend, but it very well could be true. There are certainly, in a lot of England, if there's a green space or a park, there's a cemetery underneath it. The manor house, so it was a children's home for a while, and I believe that is where Barbara worked and Thornton worked. And apparently, children who were living there would report if they weren't feeling well. They would say to the staff, the next morning, hey, thanks for sitting with me and rubbing my back. It helped me fall asleep. And nobody had been doing that. And it happened numerous occasions where somebody sits on the bed and rubs the back of the children to help them sleep. And they also very calmly mention the gray lady who sits with them. Many people have also reported a young girl in a yellow dress who vanishes into thin air, and it's believed to be Mary.
It's interesting, though, that she's seen wearing yellow when that night her clothes were white.
I know. And her normal clothing was like a floral print dress with a red spencer. Spencers that, those long-sleeved cropped jackets with tails that... Yeah, and then black stockings. I'm doing motions over here like I'm playing charades. Sorry, I hope you can't hear that on the thing. With black wool stockings and sturdy boots, so definitely also not like a delicate yellow dress. Maybe you just get to wear whatever you want when you're part of a haunt. That sounds like a picket line poster.
Well, maybe the dress is not yellow, but a white dress gone yellow, like white fabrics do over time.
Oh, that could be. Or you can only see her ghost in sepia tones.
Yeah.
That's how you know she's old-timey. I think that covers it. I hope we didn't ruin the creepy story next time you see it. You can be well, actually. You can well, actually, everybody.
Look. I think it's still creepy. I think it's still too many coincidences. Even if not all of them are true, there's still too many coincidences. If that would be an area where you say, okay, so many people get murdered, you're like, okay, whatever. But it's not.
No, you're right. It is still creepy. Even when you break it down and take out the things that can't be verified. It's creepy. It's definitely creepy. All right.
All right.
Do you have something good this week?
My something good today, when this episode drops, I have a tattoo appointment to finally get more work on my sleeve done. That's still unfinished. I haven't gone in for like 1.5 years because I had no time, and then I had an appointment, and then was all the lockdown. So yeah, now I have my appointment today, and it's going to be a lot of pain. But, you know, it's going to be fine.
Oh, I'm excited, though, to see it.
I'm going to get a bug in memory of my dad.
A bug?
Yeah, there's this June bugs or May bugs here.
Yeah.
And there's this old video that my dad recorded of me back when you had to rent the camera.
Yeah.
And I was running in a field, and you can hear him say, "Oh, look, she looks like a Maybug." And he wanted to say it doesn't work in English.
It's okay.
He wanted to say the German name for a ladybug, which is Marienkäfer, and he said Maikäfer. And it always made me laugh. It was always a joke later on. So I'm going to get a Maybug.
Like that. Oh, I love that. No, I think that's really, really nice.
So what's your something good?
I wanted to recommend John Oliver's show. I mentioned he was born in Erdington, and his show is Last Week Tonight with John Oliver, and it's definitely on our list of best topical shows, and they have all the Emmys to back it up. Now, I will warn you that probably it's liberal-leaning. He worked on The Daily Show, so if you liked The Daily Show with Jon Stewart, you'll love it. I would say if you do not consider yourself a liberal, it's still very entertaining and you might still really enjoy it. But he's got that HBO money, so they're also on YouTube. But it's very educational, and he pulls these crazy, crazy funny stunts. So he just donated $55,000 to the town of Danbury, Connecticut. I don't know if you remember, we mentioned Danbury, and they used to make the hats with the poisonous glue, and they'd get the Danbury shakes. And so we mentioned that in our Victorian episode. Yeah, so he donated the money, and they have dedicated their new sewer works, the John Oliver Memorial Sewage Treatment Plant. It's things like this that he does. Like, he bought out a bunch of things from a wax museum. Oh, he really got into it with the very last Blockbuster. It's just really good. It's really good. And it also, doing this episode, reminded me, The Streets is a Birmingham band that, well, Mike is a guy, anyway. I'm going to add some of The Streets to the Spotify playlist because I haven't listened to them for a while. And this episode is making me really, really miss my family in the UK. Very nostalgic. Lots of family trips to take when this is safe again. Every time I go to see you, Johanna, I'm going to have some family members in tow.
Yeah.
I can't wait. All right. Well, I think that's it. We may chat more in our next Patreon episode with deeper dive into weird facts about this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We have gotten so many really nice reviews this week, and I've had it's been a tough week. It's been a tough week to physically, the health stuff. It's going to be fine. But thank you so much for the reviews that you leave. Really makes my day. Sorry.
No,
okay.
It's really, people, I think nobody understands unless you do something like this, how much it means to you. Like, we're talking just to each other. We don't know if somebody's even listening. I mean, we know because we get reviews. And then when you write such nice things, or I don't know, whatever, tell us your stories, and we get emails, and it's just so lovely that you reach people.
Yeah.
It means so much to us, truly.
It really does. It really does. Yeah. So thank you so much for that. Patreon, do you want to tell them how to do the thing?
So if you want to join, or if you're interested and want to check out our Patreon, just go either to our webpage, www.freshhellpodcast.com. There you find all the links to our email, to our merch store, and to our Patreon. Or you can search for us on Patreon itself. Just go to patreon.com and type in Fresh Hell Podcast, and we should show up. We have 3 tiers. We're gonna drop 2 episodes per month. We are gonna drop the next one this weekend, right?
I think so, at least. Yeah.
Yeah, check it out. What else do? We post some photos, and I did a little blooper.
I actually have a package to open from one of our listeners, so I'll do an unboxing video.
Oh, yeah.
So we can see
things
what
like
we got.
This. A little behind the scenes, and to get to know us better. That's what I wanted to say. But it's not gonna be our usual episodes. So our usual episodes are always gonna stay like this. Nothing is gonna change. We're not gonna charge money. We're not gonna hide behind a paywall. It's all gonna stay the same.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Just can't thank you enough. So don't forget, please send us your stories. And we're freshhellpodcast@gmail.com. Or if you're in our Facebook group, you can go ahead and message one of us. That's also fine. And is that it? Did we cover tell your dogs and your cats and your bats and your frats?
What else do we have? Squirrels, axolotls,
yeah.
wallabies,
I was to say the wallaby. Oh.
guinea pig.
Yep.
Tell them all we said
Bunnies.
hi. We love them.
Tell them all. We love them. Take a Benadryl and give them a kiss. And until next week, as always, if you're going through hell,
Keep going. Tschüss.
bye.